Hello once again, and welcome to Filmography Club. I'm Jason. Today's episode is the final episode of Season 2, and it's a doozy because we're talking about Mad Max Fury Road, and we're talking about it with Will Fox. Now, Will and I go way, way back. He was my guest on the first 2 ever episodes of Filmography Club. He also edited those episodes where we talked about our shared love of the work of Paul Thomas Anderson in general, and Heart 8 and Boogie Nights in particular. I reached out to him to ask him if he wanted to talk to me about one of his favorite movies, and he sent me a gif of the Doof Warrior playing his guitar / flamethrower on top of that rig. It's always a blast talking movies with Will, and his enthusiasm for this movie is obvious. So now I present to you my conversation with Will Fox about Mad Max Fury Road. And I'm joined by Will Fox. Will, welcome back.
Hey, thanks very much. Glad to be back, man.
Yeah, man, it's been a long time. You were the guest on the first 2 episodes,
and I have been so thrilled to watch and listen as you've continued on this journey and done such a fantastic job. And really glad to be back and be a part of the continued legacy of Filmography Club.
Sure, I'll take it, man. Thanks. So I contacted you about doing one of your favorite movies, and you responded with Mad Max Fury Road. And I'm glad you did. Man, what an awesome movie. How am I going to do an entire episode of this podcast without just saying, and that other scene was fucking awesome, and the movie was fucking awesome, and that performance, that stunt, did you see that stunt? It was fucking awesome. So I'll do my best to not talk about how awesome this movie is.
No, actually, that's exactly why I chose it, because I wanted you to go into all of those fucking awesome, one after the other, because that's what this movie gives you. And one of the things about it that made me want to pick it with our conversation is because each time you and I have ever discussed it, it's like our minds have just consistently been blown, and it's been so exciting to just marvel at what is, on its surface, such a simplistic sort of thing with all of, the bombast of the best action movie ever made, but yet still have so much going on in it. There's so much to talk about with this movie.
And it's amazing that George Miller, did he come out of retirement for this movie?
No, it wasn't so much a coming out of retirement as it was just a persistence in finally getting the damn thing made. We can go into the making of component of it, but just, I don't know. I'd like to hear more about what is it about for you that this movie just completely, excites you and keeps bringing you back to it.
Well, it's about a little over 2 hours long, and the very beginning gives you just enough setup, and then it's just off to the races. It does not let up for 2 hours. It's just go, 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 pure adrenaline. And not once does any of it feel tedious. Not once am I confused about who is who. Why is this person chasing that person? All the characters in the story have their own little nuances, little quirks. They're fleshed out characters that could be henchman number 3 in a lesser script. Or I shouldn't even say script, because as you pointed out, this movie had no script. It was all storyboarded, which we'll get into that too. Such a fleshed out universe, fleshed out setting, very little CG involved in this movie. Everything feels grounded. There's real world physics at work here. It's just pure, this is going to sound pretentious. I don't care. It's pure cinema. It's pure action cinema.
No, it absolutely is. It's like it's a adrenaline shot of cinema, straight to the vein. I mean, it's the equivalent of the, I think you have to have the requisite, Tarantino reference in all of your shows,
there it is.
right?
Yeah.
So for
the
Pulp Fiction thing,
mm-hmm.
For me, there's very few movies that subjectively I look at and consider to be almost a perfect movie. One of the other ones for me is The Matrix. Frankly, I mean, The Matrix, in terms of its construction, there's nothing superfluous to it. Every shot, every piece of it seems like it is intended and needs to be there. And that's definitely the case with this movie for me, where it's a perfect fucking movie. Bottom line, in the sense of its construction and just the simplicity of it, but the deceptive simplicity of it. It is, just this distillation of a mythic hero story with all of these huge action elements just completely turned up to 11. It is, the Anthropocene action movie. It's Cirque du Soleil action. It's everything that you can imagine completely taken to the extreme, but yet with a core sort of heart and hope and fundamental sort of human story to it that makes it so universal and so easy to connect with, from the way that he approached, effectively as a silent movie, that it could translate in all cultures. I think George Miller said that, he wanted to take a cue from Hitchcock, that, they wouldn't have to read the subtitles in Japan. And he pulled it off. He pulled off an incredible feat that took, again, like 20 years in the making. He had the idea for this thing in like 1995, where the simple idea of, okay, a chase movie. I'm going to make a chase movie where the cargo is women, who are being pursued, and then, was beset by one issue after another in terms of actually getting it made, which I think the fact that beset by one thing after another to getting it made. But to go back to its inception, your point around there not really being a script, it's actually aided by the fact that there wasn't a script, because there is so much information packed into every frame of this movie, and the world building and detail is so rich that you couldn't really capture that. The script would have been 500 pages long. And so for them to actually have started from the storyboard perspective, both as a, extension of his intention to make a silent film, where it's told completely visually, but then to actually orchestrate the level of complexity that they had in terms of the visual execution of this thing. I mean, I don't know how you wouldn't have needed to actually storyboard each of these pieces, because again, it's so intricately constructed in its editing and its pacing and what it's capturing, that he was actually aided by the 20 years it took to actually bring it to the screen. Because, I think in the late 90s, all of the storyboarding that he and Brendan McCarthy, I think is the guy's name, who was sort of the storyboard artist and visualizer and co-script writer, and effectively I think according to him, the steward of the Mad Max sort of legacy.
Yeah, he's a comic book artist as well. Yeah,
the level of detail and consideration that went into the visualization of the movie via those storyboards, I think, aided it so much. It's like having that reference, in terms of the chaos of its making, out in the middle of the desert, I can imagine was a huge help to the entire crew. Are you aware of, like, I guess, all of the, starts and stops and all of the crazy sort of background in terms of getting it made that they went through?
I saw that. I think pre-production started in 97, and there was some start and stop again in 2003, and there was a lot of, but I don't really know any of the details of it.
Well, for the audience, it's like, all right, they start in the late 90s, and they start storyboarding it, and they start going into pre-production. They've got, a deal with Fox, because at the time Mel Gibson was actually going to be Max in it. And he was set up at Fox. So they started sort of prepping it there, and were originally going to shoot it in Australia, where the other Mad Maxes were shot, I think in a place called Button Hill. And then we're prepping it, and we're going to shoot in the early 2000s. But then 9/11 happened, and the dollar dropped relative to the Australian dollar in such a way that like a third of their budget just sort of disappeared. Mm-hmm. And the guy, the production designer, had already been going through the building and designing of a lot of these cars and rigs and everything. And they basically just had to, pack it all up and shut down for a few years. And then they tried to get it going again in 2003. But then with the Iraq war and all this other stuff, that went away. then, well, actually, I think they got it back up and going like in the mid 2000s again in Button Hill. But then like this huge torrential, like typhoon rainstorm, rain season came through. And what was intended, of course, to be this desert wasteland landscape suddenly, was a complete, turned into a river. And then when all of that dried up, all of this greenery showed up, and it like basically turned into, Ireland, according to them. And it's like, well, we can't shoot here now. It's like there's all this vegetation everywhere. And so again, they had to close up shop, and they shipped everything back to this place in Africa, Namibia, where ultimately they ended up shooting the film. But it wasn't until like 2012 that they actually started production. So I mean, you've got effectively this almost 20 years. It was literally 20 years from 95 when he had the idea to 2015 when the movie came out, and all of these setbacks throughout the entire process is just, it's remarkable to consider that you go through all of those travails, and yet still, and then of course just the chaos of whatever the shoot was, which I can just go on and on about this, Jason, but yeah, I mean, then the chaos of them being in the desert for I think like the 8-month-long shoot. And Charlize Theron and Tom Hardy, they didn't know what the hell was going on. They were, just basically lost and at odds with one another. Apparently, it was a really, really torturous shoot for both of them. They didn't understand what George Miller was doing. Tom Hardy, in particular, was completely lost, and apparently was very difficult to work with through that time. The way that the movie was shot, was just pieces and parts, and for these actors who were used to, doing full scenes and sort of having a lot of dialogue, of which there's hardly any in this movie, they just could never really get their bearings. And you can imagine that with George Miller, with all of the elements that are at work and at play, all of these huge stunts. And, he said that one of the biggest thing, that the primary focus that he had day after day after day was the anxiety of all of the stunts, that somebody was going to get hurt. And so his focus, not only just kind of keeping everything corralled and wrangled amidst what I'm sure was just total chaos in the desert with so many moving parts. You have these little coddled, movie stars that are effectively, puppets in this play, and important puppets, and they do a fine job in the movie. I mean, ultimately, it all gets pulled off, but I mean, I can empathize with them being felt like cast to the sandstorm. That was the making of this movie out there.
Yeah, during award season, I couldn't imagine any actors being put up, being nominated for anything. This is a technical achievement, this movie.
No, and how validating ultimately to see all of the technicians, so many of the filmmakers or so many of the people who worked on this movie win Oscars. Like, when the night of the Academy Awards, when like they won 6 technical Academy Awards in a row, it was just like, yes. I mean,
they absolutely should have. Just a technical marvel,
for sure. And here's the thing: it's like, not only is this one of the, I mean, it's bar none, if not the best, one of the top 3 best action films of all time. And even with it being an action film, which kind of you can expect to come with all of its tropes and all that sort of stuff, it does not adhere to any of those outside of what are just really fundamental good storytelling structure and sort of mythic orientation, right? I mean, George Miller himself, you talk about him having not really done a whole lot before this, or like seemingly, but really he was doing stuff the whole time. He was making children's movies. Yeah,
he did Happy Feet, I think, and Babe. And it's just amazing to think that the guy that made a movie about a pig, Lost in the City, made what I would consider to be maybe the finest action movie ever made.
Totally. But that's
an elderly man at that.
I wanted to get to that as well. I mean, children's movies. I mean, he produced Babe, and then he directed Babe 2, and then he went and did 2 Happy Feets. And then suddenly he resurrects this 30-year-old franchise and character that he'd been sort of, again, diligently trying to bring to fruition. But he translated, I think, all of those fundamental narrative constructs that work so well in children's films, and like these very sort of simplistic ideas and themes, and translate it into this adult, huge R-rated action film. And it's exactly the simplicity of that storytelling and just the adhering to strict, clear, mythic fundamentals that make it come off so well. It's like apart from the thrill and the excitement of all of the action, inside of it is actually a really clear message too that is timely in terms of the Mad Max franchise emerging at the end of the 20th century. And emerging out of the 70s in terms of the gas shortage and mechanized man, and we can kind of get into all the sort of subtextual stuff of it. But that message, he wraps up the medicine in a really sweet confection, that goes down really, really easily. Let's not forget that not only having pulled off that achievement, all of the sort of going to war and coming out the other end of it and winning these awards and getting the adulation of, not only just critics who can imagine, such a well-reviewed, action movie, coming out of all of that chaos and getting the adulation and all the validation, not only critically, but the audience loving it, that it was a bunch of 70-year-olds who made the damn thing.
Let's not forget that. Most crews are about half the age of the guys that were in charge of the different departments on this movie. And they put on a clinic in how to make a movie to people half their age.
It is a masterclass. And, maybe, it's only, wise and weathered filmmakers like them who could pull something like this off, him pulling the cinematographer, John Seale, out of retirement to come and make this movie, who himself was I guess nearly 70. George Miller was late 60s and 70 at the time the movie came out. His wife, who edited the film, which in and of itself I think is a brilliant choice on his part, choosing her because she is a woman and because she was going to approach this film and from a completely different perspective than what one would expect in terms of all these action films. Yeah, so many good choices made from a crew perspective. But yeah, it's mind-boggling that a group of 60 and 70-year-olds can go and show all the young whippersnappers how to do it.
Those guys, they made what a lot of people consider to be an action masterpiece back in 81, The Road Warrior? Was it 81, something like that? And people, I remember watching that movie all the time. It was on HBO constantly back in the day when I was a kid. And I fucking loved it. And I didn't think that there would ever be a car chase or a chase sequence to rival that third act. And then here comes that same group of men 3+ decades later. They're like, not only are we going to take what worked in that movie and just crank it, what worked all the way up, give you more of that, it's going to be the whole movie. You thought it was ridiculous that we had a whole third act that was a chase scene? No, we're going to make a 2-hour movie. The first hour is a chase. The second half is a race. For years, I didn't think anybody would top. Well, you know what? I'm about to compare apples and oranges. I was going to compare, like, say, The Raid to this, but these are two totally different styles of action. Two totally different. Yeah.
Well, that Road Warrior piece, it's like it was kind of held up as, the penultimate, one of the best action movies. And so for them to, effectively outdo themselves in the process of outdoing everybody else.
Left themselves in the dust, I'd say, too. To go back and watch The Road Warrior now, it's kind of quaint after having watched Fury Road. And I used to swear by The Road Warrior. Look, not to take away from The Road Warrior, it's a marvel too. Look at it in its zeitgeist. It's time and place. It's head and shoulders above most other action movies. But this just blows them out of the water. And they didn't cheat. It's not a CG fest. This could have easily have been a cartoon. This could have all been done in a computer somewhere, but they took the time. They took the decades, apparently, to get it right.
To give credit to The Road Warrior, though, I mean, that world building that he did and the sort of extension and really sort of reinventing the post-apocalyptic kind of story and inserting all of the imagination of, all of the cars and the characters and giving it. One of the things I love about him as a stylist and as a storyteller, really, as a sort of mythic storyteller, is him telling all of his crew, and even back with The Road Warrior, acknowledging that, okay, even in the sort of post-apocalyptic wasteland, people are still going to be attuned to beauty, and they're still going to be attuned to detail. And so the labor of, detail that he gave or, inspired all of his crew and collaborators to give to that world, right, is really remarkable. And, without the Road Warrior, there is no Fury Road, because so much of what was great about the Mad Max franchise that he established there is partly what they wanted to double down on, in this movie. And so for it to just become the chase, to be the Western on wheels, as they call it, right, is just badass. That's the thing. It's like just badass. I remember
it all comes back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
it's fucking
like
awesome.
You can talk about all of the, the cool stuff, the detail, and that's the thing. It's like there's so much to look at. It is absolutely this candy store, but yeah, with the medicine in it too, which I do want to get to. But I just have such a fond memory of seeing it in the theater too, because I remember being at work, and it was just one of those days where, there's not a whole lot going on, and look around at the team, and it's like, that new Mad Max movie's out at the theater. Let's beg off and go to the movies, and we all did. And so we all collectively went to see Mad Max. It was just what was a kind of a drab day turned into this amazing explosion of cinematic exquisiteness that I was glad to both share with friends and colleagues, and then just to kind of continually be baffled and marvel at what the hell I just experienced.
Mm-hmm. I remember that, as a matter of fact. I remember you telling me, go see this movie now while it's in theater. You will regret not having seen it on a big screen. And for whatever reason, I didn't. I don't know. It was 5 years ago. I don't really remember. But at the moment I saw it on a smaller screen, I really regretted not having taken your advice.
Well, there's definitely something to, and I'm surprised that there hasn't been sort of a theatrical revival for it. There ought to be. It's like, I know that there's sort of like a time period that one expects, but as far as I'm concerned, every 5 years they should re-release this in the theater. COVID year aside, but yeah, I mean it's the loudest experience with some of the best sound and music. It is to your point around it being potentially cartoony. It's like ultimately it's a translation of a heavy metal magazine comic, coupled with Slayer, and you just spit it out the other end through this like kaleidoscope of color, which is another really great stylistic choice that he made right from the outset. Was we're not going to make this kind of muted, desaturated, post-apocalyptic world. I want to turn up all of the color, and it's so brilliant in terms of its oranges and its blues, and so the image is so rich and dynamic, and brings such detail to what is so many things going on in each of the frames. That stylistically, I think, was just a mark of genius on his part. And the other sort of technical choice that he made that I think really helps translate the movie is the center framing of everything, and it being a very deliberate choice on his part, knowing that it was going to be so kinetic in terms of everything that's going on in the frame and the sort of the cutting style of it, that by keeping everything basically centered, that you as the audience would actually be able to keep up and always remain oriented to what you should be oriented to. That helps subtly pull the movie off in a way that had he not done that, you could have easily ended up in this jumble of stuff happening and not understanding where you are, where the characters are. So in terms of the orchestration, the visual orchestration of not only just what's going on and all of the shots, you never lose your place in it.
It's easy to marvel at what this movie is, because there's just so much to marvel at and to just be impressed by. But what it could have been easily, like I said earlier, it could have been a big CGI cartoon. It also could have been just a big fucking mess. It could have been, you don't know who's who, you don't know what's what. Everything from just the big caravan chase sequences, all of the vehicles have their own distinct look and personality. At no point are you confused by who's who, by who's chasing who, why they're chasing them. Could have been a big shaky cam mess. Things could have gone wrong in so many different ways, and George Miller seems to have just hired the exact right people, or was just clear enough in communicating what he was looking for to his crew, if not his cast, that again, it's just fucking awesome.
Yeah, I know. It just kind of comes back to that, and that, as it should be.
About the color palettes, though, you're right. This movie has its own distinct color palette. I think the only two that kind of even look alike are the second and third, Road Warrior and Beyond Thunderdome. Both kind of drab-looking movies. Certainly Road Warrior. It almost has like a documentary look to it. Everything seems kind of drab and dull. Whereas the first movie, I think that's the only Mad Max movie that has any green in it.
Sure. Yeah.
And I remember very little about the third one. And by the way, if you're concerned about not having seen any of the other Mad Max movies, don't bother. There's no continuity whatsoever. They just throw you into the movie and you can pick it up as you go along. There's very little continuity. None of it's really important. I don't think George Miller cares about that.
Yeah, I agree with you on the one hand, and then I disagree with you on the other. Only in the sense that you're 100% right that each of these movies can be viewed as a standalone, and while there is definitely threads that in terms of the character and who he represents and the world building that occurs, that is interesting to carry over as you watch each of these things. Because again, I do see Fury Road being sort of this the apex of whatever sort of ideas and world that he was trying to build, and the level of sort of action execution that was being built through the others. To have a sense of appreciation of that definitely helps. But Fury Road as a standalone absolutely works without anything before it. Fury Road definitely works as a standalone, but in the sense that, he's drawing from these Western traditions. I've been watching, or at least I've tried to watch The Mandalorian. I'm not sure if you keep up with that.
I saw the first season. I canceled my Disney Plus right at the beginning of the pandemic. But
well, I've not been keeping up with the Mandalorian second season because it too adheres so closely to those Western sort of tropes and structure of the stranger walks into town and needs and agrees to help the townsfolk achieve some objective, right? And that's effectively what each of the Mad Max movies are as well. And so he's building very clearly on that Western sort of the Western structure.
Mm-hmm. The man with no name, even.
Yeah.
He doesn't even give his name until well into the movie. Yeah.
And so in the same way that, The Mandalorian, everybody kind of loves it right now, and it's not doing anything really original outside of just placing these old story tropes within the Star Wars world. George Miller's doing that only within his own specially constructed world that has, again, so much detail and so much, resonance effectively in terms of this moment in time. The fact that it's a post-apocalyptic sort of world in which man is effectively, become married to gasoline and money and, power, that it brings the world to its end, and then we're all just sort of left to pick up the pieces and make of it what we will. And what this movie does so well, and all of them, is kind of it hints at what could actually really happen to us if we continue on the path that we're on. It's a statement on the environment, and it's a statement on gender relations, and there's so much underlying richness to it that can, again, be the medicine that's going down with the sugar. But it's important not to lose sight, I think, in terms of what his concerns are as a filmmaker and as a storyteller. One of the most powerful things about this movie and what it injects into the Mad Max sort of world is the role of the female. And, introducing a female road warrior, number one, with Furiosa, but again, in very stark allegorical colors, saying, men bad, warlord, try to control people, try to hoard resource, right? And try to imprison captive women to be my
breeders.
Yeah. Who broke the world? It says, and in one of the early drafts of the script that I looked at, it said, fathers broke the world in the script. That's what it said. But, I'm glad that they, who broke the world? Well, it's no question in terms of watching the movie that, men broke the world, and it's women who hold the power for the rebirth of our world. They're on their way, in the sense of hope, to the green place, all these very sort of simple kind of constructs, but striving for a better world, and one in which, we do away with the sense of reliance on gasoline and bullets and blood, and instead embrace the seeds of life and try to embrace a world of abundance, or create a world of abundance. It's basically that mission that Mad Max gets wrapped up in, and suddenly, again, finds his personal redemption in being an assist and finding his way and finding some meaning in all that. But yeah, girls rule the world, as it should be. And this is a picture of a movie in which they have lost power.
I think you just touched on why this movie is so rewarding, and it for a couple of reasons. It rewards repeated viewings. There's one, just all the world building stuff, just the set design, little things that you notice that you maybe didn't notice the first time that you watched it, where you can infer the world at large and maybe the culture that's popped up around here. But also, in addition to the loud engines and the explosions and just the nonstop onslaught of top shelf action cinema, there's also a lot of social issues that are being addressed here, like you mentioned. Obviously, there's gender dynamics at work here. There's commentary on where we're headed as a human race, perhaps, if we don't play our cards right. There's also themes of autonomy, not just for the women, but especially the women. They're referred to as breeders, but Max himself, Nux calls him blood bag almost the entire movie. I think the entire movie, he's blood bag. He's just a thing that I can utilize.
The thing about the blood bag, though, is that, he is the blood bag for Nux in the beginning, but then ultimately in the end, he's giving his blood to Furiosa, and he's, bringing her back to life, and
willingly.
Willingly. And that's when he tells her his name, So, I mean, it's sort of his
She just calls him Fool, I think. That's her substitute name for him, Fool.
Yeah.
The tribe, I'm just going to call them tribes or clans. I don't really know. It's never established. There's all the different ones. There's the Bullet Farm.
Yeah,
those guys who create the ammunition that he's an ally of Immortan Joe, the villain in this movie. Then there's another group. Who are those guys?
Well, there's Guzzling Town, right?
Yes, exactly. It's two things that modern society are addicted to are exemplified in these smaller tribes or clans.
Yeah, you got the Bullet Town folks, and you got the Guzzling, and then Immortan Joe with his green, with him having the water and the produce. Effectively, it's like that's what they're trading. They're trading in water, produce for gas or guzz and bullets. Bullets and gas. Like that's what we're going to get, and that's the trade.
But then there's that fourth crew that they run across. All of the women, the clan that's made up entirely of women that Furiosa apparently has a backstory with.
Yeah, the many mothers, right?
Right. Yes, exactly. And I'm sure that's going to get explored in the Furiosa prequel that's upcoming.
Well, again, here I have to give him props, though. I mean, on the one hand, sure, it's like you want to continue to capitalize on what's a hit. And yeah, the new path of Furiosa in terms of the female road warrior and really bringing in that kind of perspective to this landscape is a new and exciting territory for him, right? And it's a worthwhile one, considering that the last few have all been sort of this male perspective, and introducing this female character and who did come from this land of many mothers and this sort of matriarchal society. Is what they're trying to get to. And of course, when they finally get there, they realize ultimately that there's nothing there, that it too had been lost. The green place wasn't there, so it's like these stories that we tell ourselves that, that pretty much capture the hope that we're all after and that we're manufacturing for ourselves in some sense, when, really, what do? They just return to where they came from. Right. And it's like, you got to get back. You basically have to just make do with where you are and actually institute some sort of change there.
Yeah. You yourself have to do it. You can't keep running to some mythical Shangri-La. That place isn't real. There's no justice other than what you make.
Exactly. And have you heard of this take on Mad Max or Fury Road with the Wizard of Oz? Of course, people always try to pull these things together in a way, but I found it really interesting that one, it's a testament to the sort of simplistic, fundamental storytelling that's at play in Mad Max, and that it's basically just, the fables that we, and fairy tales of children's movies, like we talked about George Miller sort of being steeped in and having actually been producing for many years. And he just basically goes and applies it in this adult sort of framework here, that there's a lot of similarities to the Wizard of Oz, apparently, and that you've got Furiosa as the Tin Man and Nux as the Scarecrow, and Max as the cowardly lion, with Furiosa and Max both being an amalgamation of Dorothy, where they're trying to get back home, right? And and they're being pursued by this evil person, right? And that ultimately, to try to get to the Emerald Palace, to get to Oz, wait a minute, the curtain gets pulled back and it's actually not what you thought it was going to be. And, therefore, to your point, you have to actually make do with what you've got. And that's where you're going to actually find some sort of progress, right? No,
I hadn't heard that. It doesn't surprise me, though. I mean, these sorts of stories are kind of, there's the hero's journey. There are certain archetypal stories. And, I think both of them probably just kind of fall into, if it doesn't sync up with Dark Side of the Moon, I'm not interested. So.
Totally.
You got to be pretty high for that to work, though. Well,
yeah, you got it. It is just basic hero's journey stuff. But when you again take such a simple kernel and then just add so much detail and level of excellent execution around it, you just have to marvel and appreciate it. And so I grabbed a couple of pull quotes from reviews for it that I just felt like, give it the proper hyperbolic sort of appreciation that it deserves. Because, I don't think that people can really call this movie overrated because it earns every bit of its badassery. Let's see. A gargantuan grunge symphony of vehicular mayhem.
Yeah.
Love it.
Okay, sure.
Believe the hype. This movie will melt your face off.
Yes. Yes.
A double-barreled shotgun enema straight to the senses.
Wow, a double-barreled shotgun enema?
Straight to the senses.
Okay, yeah, I agree. Yeah, hard agree. Yeah.
Yeah, those things captured. I mean, you can't say enough good things about it, really. And I don't know
it feels like an art house movie in a way. If you kind of sit and think about it, it kind of works on both levels. It's got one foot in pretentious cinema because of, just one, it's gorgeous to look at. Like you mentioned earlier, everything is framed towards the center, and blues and oranges, amber and teal, that color palette that I think is going to become synonymous with that decade. Everything seems to be amber and teal to the point where I'm usually distracted by it, but it totally makes sense in this movie. My point being, a gorgeous movie just to look at. You could just pause on any random frame and it's going to be beautiful. And like we touched on with all the social issues, there's a lot of that stuff at work too. But again, it's a movie where at the end of the day, a bunch of shit blows up. A bunch of cool vehicles are blowing up constantly. It's great.
And they're doing it in a frame for real, like you said. The practical execution of this and just the organic nature of it. I think most of the CG, it was a lot of sky replacement and like wire replacement, and of course, sort of compositing stuff in.
Sure, and the tornado, the big sandstorm. Of course, they didn't. Of course,
yeah. Which, well, there you go. Another Wizard of Oz piece, right?
Yeah. Yeah, an absolutely gorgeous movie on all those levels. All the stop with the production of this movie. It took 25 some odd years to actually get going in earnest, from idea to the film being in cinemas. I think it may have been time well spent, because I don't know, it certainly wouldn't be the same movie if it were released in 2000 or 2005 even. The technology just wasn't quite there. There's a reason why the Road Warrior, the chase sequence at the end, looks the way it does. It's fine. It's exciting. You're right there in it, but it's not Fury Road level. And I believe it's because of, forgive me, I don't know the name of this thing, the big mechanical arm that the camera was on, that you can, you know what I'm talking about? During the chase sequences where they had it going up in between vehicles. And I don't think
the techno crane that's like on top of the vehicle.
Yeah. This movie would not be the same movie without that thing. And I think that's a fairly recent development, or at least it's been improved upon to the point where when they shot this film in 2013, or whenever it was, I think it was 2013, the technology was finally there where they could really frame up stuff really accurately. Like that one shot where it introduces Max on the front of Nux's vehicle with the thing over his face. Then the camera moves to the side and we get a nice profile of Nux, and then up to his Lancer, I think, his partner, the guy that was outside of his vehicle, running around, crawling over it. And then it pulls back, and then we get that shot of the, what's it called? The doof rig?
The doof warrior.
Oh my God. That is one of the most iconic shots in cinema history. Just instant classic. Him playing that guitar with all those amps and the flamethrower. And again, awesome. And by the way, and for the audience, when I texted Will about, getting him to come on and talk about one of his favorite movies, he just sent me a GIF or a GIF or however you pronounce it of that moment when the flames shoot out of the guy's guitar. It's like, yep, I'm in. That is easily one of the most iconic shots in modern cinema history, if not the most iconic shot. It's ridiculous. It encompasses the movie perfectly. It's gorgeous. It's fucking ridiculous. And it's just so over the top awesome that you can't help but be curious.
Well, to your point around it only really being able to be made during that time and that it being helped by the technology, you're right that in terms of the mobility of the camera that they were able to do with the vehicles is one, but also them shooting it digitally. They used, Alexa cameras and also like this whole arsenal of DSLRs, like Canon 5Ds that they had in terms of like all these crash cams and being able to put a camera up basically anywhere they wanted to. So yeah, that combination of being able to shoot digitally, I think they ended up with like 470 hours of footage from the entirety of that shoot that they had to sort through. So you can imagine, the distillation process and the job that his wife, had editing this thing. But yeah, the doof warrior, I mean, come on. It's like that alone. It's like, even if everything else was barren of no good, crazy ideas, I mean, the doof warrior and the polecats, it's like those two introductions are completely original.
Blew my mind when I found out that the polecats, there was no digital enhancement with that whatsoever. Every bit of that's real. To get people, I think they spoke to, I think you mentioned Cirque du Soleil earlier. I believe they got with somebody that had worked on Cirque du Soleil, or at least that was the initial, maybe that was just the germ of the idea.
My understanding is they actually had Cirque du Soleil performers and like Olympic athletes who were a part of the stunt team in order to pull all that stuff off.
That took a lot of working out too. They had to like really sit down and think about how they could do this practically. George Miller just immediately thought when he came up with that idea, like, this is probably going to have to be some kind of a digital element that we're going to put into the movie. No, they figured it out. They actually found poles that had just enough give, not too much, not too little, but just enough give, just ways to counterbalance it with the counterweight at the bottom of it, which of course, engine blocks. This is Mad Max. Why not? Yeah, every bit of that works. And it's practical. It totally makes sense in the world, in the environment that we're watching. The production value on this thing, you can just look at a vehicle or the way one of these members of a clan is dressed, and you know exactly what clan he's a part of. There's the guys that have the spikes all over their vehicles. There's obviously the war boys who are sort of religious zealots like Nux, who, by the way, we've barely even mentioned Nux. And he's certainly one of my favorite characters in the movie. Him and Furiosa are just fantastic in this. But anyway, so yeah, I think what I was getting at was there's I hate to say it's a new trend, but it sort of is, where we're finally having filmmakers push back against just going to the green screen and just doing it in post and having an army of special effects people deal with this stuff. And we're actually using real world practical effects everywhere that we possibly can. It gives the movie a weight to it. It keeps it from feeling cartoonish, even though there's all sorts of nonsense going on. There's like the mechanical arm that comes out of the one rig that's got the saws on it that starts sawing away at Furiosa's war rig cab.
That's cool, and it's awesome. Terrifying.
But it was real. That was a real thing that they built. It was not done in CG. And I can't stress enough how impressive that is. And if you think that it doesn't really matter, go take a look at the Star Wars prequels and then take a look at the Star Wars sequel. And I'm not talking about the stories. I'm just talking about just from a technical level. Look at what works. Look at what is obviously shot in a big green room versus being on an actual set with actual people who are interacting with actual objects. It's worlds apart. You can't really, at least at this point in history, replace the one with the other and not have it be noticeable. It's obvious. And this movie went the extra mile to make sure that everything that happened in it that could be cartoonish was not. It felt real. It felt like there was weight to it. There was consequence to the violence. It wasn't just Looney Tunes nonsense all over the place. Again, it's not what this movie is so much as it's what this movie is and versus what it could be. It could have been.
It's funny that you say Looney Tunes, though, because it is absolutely, a Wile E. Coyote Roadrunner cartoon on the one hand.
It's in the desert too. Yeah.
But to your point, that the physicality and the practicality of the way that they executed it is what really sets it apart. And I think that's what kind of reminded everybody of what's actually possible in real world filmmaking. Because green screen is going to continue to just be ubiquitous, and now they've got these like LED domes effectively on set that enable you to basically, back project, an entire 360 degree, view of what a set or environment is. And you're going to see more and more of that. And while they're doing it for cost reasons and all that sort of stuff, it's like when you do something for real and there's not this sort of digital veil to it all, it connects much more viscerally with us as humans, I think. Mm-hmm. And so, to get to that archetypal hero journey stuff, and to just kind of take it right to the heart of explosion and blood, violence and life. Again, it's got all of that stuff, all of the good ingredients, and it's one of the film that, as an action movie, it's like, I know that that's not a lot of people's bags, but in terms of like this just being an example of next level filmmaking, it demands viewing and appreciation as an artifact for itself. It's like, it's not just your normal action film. It's not, just a cartoon. There's real shit going on, and there's real blood, sweat, and tears that went into it. Again, with some very mature filmmakers that just demands every level of respect. So even if you're not into action film, this needs to be. It demands to be seen, just as a beautiful document on the one hand, but also just a perfect execution of film and cinema language, going all the way back to the beginning in terms of silent film. And even the black and white sort of thing, which I think it was really smart of them to. I think the black and chrome version of this movie is actually worth a watch for anybody who likes the movie but hasn't actually encountered that on the Blu-ray. It sort of again brings it all down to just its basic form: black and white visuals. It's the Western on wheels, the starkness of its storytelling and imagery. So Mad Max Fury Road is the best action film of all time. I'm saying it here.
Yeah, I felt like a chump when I finally watched it. I think it had been available on Blu-ray or home video, whatever, for maybe 9 months to a year when I finally got around to watching it. And I could not believe that I slept on such. It's a masterpiece. So this movie is easily one of the best movies of the last 20 years, I'd say, as far as just pure technical and visceral achievement.
It's the reason why I wanted to talk about this movie today, just because, all right, in what has been one hellacious year with a lot of awfulness to it, to actually revisit this movie gives me a bit of joy, ironically, in all of the sort of destruction that it depicts and sort of awful wasteland stuff. The sheer joy of mastery, witnessing such filmmaking craft, just, I don't know, it just gets me so excited. And I look, and I hope that others who encounter this movie kind of get the same type of excitement and joy out of it in its total visceral way.
You'll love it the first time you watch it, and the second time you watch it, you're going to get more out of it. There's stuff that we haven't even touched on, but there's just so much to appreciate about this movie. The world building is so rich and immersive that the second time you watch it, you'll start noticing little things that you may have missed, things that add to the culture of each little clan, and of course the subtext that we touched on earlier with gender dynamics, the idea of autonomy, the different industries, be they arms or produce or fuel, all that stuff. You'll get a lot out of it. That's the second time you watch it, but you got to watch it that first time. Wonderful.
Yeah,
movie.
just
highest recommendation.
Go for the roller coaster ride.
And again, you don't have to watch the other movies. Just know post-apocalypse, go. That's it.
Well, on that, I'm going to go as well. Thank you very much for having me. And
thanks for coming, Will. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you, brother. Till next time.
Take care.
And that's it for this episode, and that's it for this season of Filmography Club. I've thoroughly enjoyed working on this season. We've explored the work of Jeremy Saulnier, one of my favorite new filmmakers. I encourage you to check out his stuff. Last time I checked, it was still streaming on Netflix, especially Blue Ruin and Green Room. They're insanely good. I got to talk about some of my favorite movies as well. I'm thinking about Raising Arizona, one of the funniest movies ever made, in my opinion. I got to rediscover Jaws for the first time as an adult, which was a real treat. I'm a Spielberg fan, no apologies. I got to explore the world of the Universal monster movies in general and really delve into Bride of Frankenstein in particular, which is another masterpiece. And I got turned on to a filmmaker I'd been meaning to check out for many years. I'm talking about Akira Kurosawa and his stunningly beautiful work, Ikiru, truly one of the most moving films I've ever seen. It's been awfully fun. I've learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to starting on season 3. Please remember to give us a rating on whatever platform you're using, maybe a review too. Anything helps. I'd like to thank my guest today, Will Fox. I'd also like to thank Michael Leeds and Ross Warner. Filmography Club is produced here in Nashville, Tennessee by the always hardworking folks at We Own This Town. I'm Jason Caviness. This is Filmography Club. Thanks for listening.